The scene was tense and uneasy as the young woman found herself trapped beneath the towering figure of the man. As she lay on the floor, feeling trapped and afraid, the man looked down at her and asked why she was avoiding him. In response, the lady replied that she had to leave, but the man was reluctant to let her go. She observed him closely, noticing how his behavior seemed to shift from that of a young boy that shed innocent tears to a man with the eyes of a beast, determined to get what he wanted at any cost. Desperate to keep her by his side, he grabbed her wrist and kissed it, pleading with her to stay. The young woman couldn't help but feel like she had stumbled into the middle of a gripping novel, with the intense and complex main character standing before her. Meanwhile, in the prison, the guard slammed on the cell and called for prisoner 4486. Her urgent package had arrived. The young girl lying on the bed opened her eyes. She could not understand how she ended up not in her room, sitting up on the bed, and after having a glance she realized with horror that she was in a prison cell in a prison jumpsuit too. It was cold inside the cell. She thought about how all that situation could be a dream, but unfortunately, that wasn't a dream. At some point, she realized that she was in a dark romance novel as an unknown side character that she had read a long time ago. But she was indeed the main character. The lady had found herself in a situation of distress and compared how other people who become book characters wake up to a gilded ceiling and in a luxurious bed, but how it was the opposite for her. After a great deal of thought, she decided to accept her fate as Ianna. She thought herself to be unlucky to have landed in an R-rated dark romance novel, which was famous for being a superstar dark romance. The story of the novel starts with the main character Francia was locked in Cambricum for her father's brutal crime. One day, while going for a walk secretly, this curious and innocent lady met a man locked deep underground. The man was the main character of the book Rikedoran von Hernim. His family house Hernim had a great power that was passed down for generations. Anyone unable to suppress the power passed down from generation to generation was locked away in the depths of Cambricum and was not allowed to leave until they could control it. This power made a beast out of a man. They would lose all sense of reason and exhibit strength greater than that of a human. After hearing his story, innocent Francia undid the magic that had been restraining him, but because of the power, Rikedoran lost his mind and became a beast. Ianna decided not to remember the continuation of the story because the book was rated 18+. But then she remembered that the extremely handsome main dark villain was added to the story somewhere in the middle of the love story. Then the whole book revolved around a dangerous love triangle between the main characters. The male lead has a rough personality and the villain becomes obsessed with the female lead. Ianna found it intriguing after remembering the plot of the story. Because the main character and the villain are from rival families and they both are into the female lead, the story continues in high society within the outside world as well. So the main story continues, though it is absurd that she appeared in the novel and that she was a minor character waking up in Cambricum prison. Ianna was playing cards with Hans, a prison guard who had access to the gate underground. She had plotted her plan to bribe him to gain access to the central ward where the main character was being held. In the main story, the central ward was the most heavily guarded area of the prison, with all of the prisoners being knights. Due to the high level of violence associated with Rikedoran, security had become increasingly strict day by day. However, at the time of the card game, the story had not yet begun and the security was relatively light, making bribery a possible means of achieving her goal. Ianna was determined to carry out her plan, no matter the cost, and she knew that she needed to act quickly before the security measures became even more stringent. After winning the game, she gave him a bottle of liquor. Ianna tried to find that main lead, but the guard stopped her, saying that she could not go further. Ianna grinned and asked if she could watch Rikedoran. But the guard declined. Then she gave him a packet of cigars and the guard agreed. The girl took the keys to the prisoner's cell and began to open the door while turning over the keys in her hands in search of what she needed. Ianna heard a question about where she could get such good alcohol and cigars. She replied that she simply wrote to her brother about it, and he sent her. Ianna went into the cell. The path to the underground was much more worse than she had imagined. The place was not being managed at all. Ianna froze when she saw Rikedoran on the floor. She admired Rikedoran's beauty and thought that the main character was quite handsome. As she scrutinized his face more closely, At that moment, Rikedoran, the book's protagonist, heard someone enter the room and looked up to see who it was. Ianna observed as his eyes quickly opened, and the man on all fours sat down on the floor, the light from the lantern casting shadows across his face. She couldn't make sense of what was happening and felt a sense of unease. Suddenly, Rikedoran's eyes gleamed, and then he barked at her, startling Ianna. She couldn't help but wonder why the superior male lead was barking at her like a dog. Ianna pulled back and found Rikedoran sitting on the floor of the prison cell. She tried to process what had just happened and why he kept growling at her. Ianna quickly decided that it was all due to the power that makes a person a beast meant that he'd become a dog. Rikedoran licked himself and was in a pathetic condition covered in dirt. Ianna noticed an illuminating restraining circle around Rikedoran's neck, which she remembered reading about in a novel. She approached him cautiously and tried to touch the circle. As soon as she did, Rikedoran's eyes grew shallow and his personality seemed to change. It was as if he had become a different person altogether. Rikedoran lunged at her with what looked like agitation and frustration in his face, but he couldn't reach her. It was evident that a powerful magic spell had been cast to prevent him from reaching her. Rikedoran tried hard to push and break the red magic circle, but it was of no use. Ianna sighed a breath of relief at this weird circumstance. The situation had startled her, and she started to wonder why they hadn't chained Rikedoran and rather used magic instead. Ianna had almost gotten bitten. She wondered what kind of male lead bites and what was his reason for getting violent. She assumed that it was because she touched the circle on his neck. Ianna rested near the wall as Rikedoran continued his bark. Ianna, after a while, figured out she needed to calm him down first and pondered on what she could use to divert Rikedoran's attention. Ianna saw a dirty stick near her foot and threw it towards Rikedoran. He was mesmerized and picked up the stick by his mouth with great pleasure. When Ianna saw that he picked it up by his teeth, she was not expecting that. She asked for the stick as it was dirty. Rikedoran shifted his body far away from her. Ianna now realized that he could understand her, and more importantly, she needed him to spit the stick out. Ianna decided to interest him by showing him her hair tie. Rikedoran got distracted by that hair tie and threw the dirty stick back onto the floor and tried to give him the hair tie. When she tried to pick up the stick, Rike caught hold of her hands, his eyes different, grabbed her wrist and took it closer to his mouth. Ianna thought he was trying to bite him at that moment, but then he froze. Rike sat on the floor and asked him what she had done to him. He chuckled and trembled, repeating the same question, and the girl did not understand what had happened to him. Rike repeated that it was his first time what had she done to him and that no one had ever made him bite something like that beside her. He started weeping and Ianna was awestruck. For a moment Rike wept and later Ianna asked if he was feeling okay, to which he responded that he was just a little taken aback because that was his first time. Ianna listened patiently, but she couldn't help but worry that someone might overhear their conversation and get the wrong idea. Rike had a tendency to talk about his first time frequently, which could be misinterpreted by those who didn't know what he was referring to. After observing him, she decided that this is what he looks like in his original form when he returns to his senses. Decided to apologize to the branch, but in response, she heard from Rike that she was the first to apologize to him. Ianna approached him, grabbed his hand, and said that even though she was the first, he would experience such kindness in the future and would not even remember today. Suddenly, within all this tension, Hans called for Ianna. It was time for her to leave. As she ran back, she wondered how long has Rike been down there, sitting in that cell and relying on nothing but the faint light coming from the entrance. The place was a lot darker, and he was much younger than she expected, so she felt sorry for the main character and promised that she would come to him again. Rike wanted to see her face, but the light of the lamp could not reach that far. In the palace, the guard brought news to the king that there was an intruder in the underground cell. The king knew that their most dangerous prisoner was being held there and was pissed at how his security could be breached. In a fit of rage, the king forcefully slammed his hand on the table with a loud thud as he demanded his messenger to immediately locate the intruder. Many prisoners gathered in the central living room of Cambercombe prison, spending their free time communicating with each other. Ianna wondered how could a place like that be called a prison. The longer she was there, the more interesting this seemed. It was not new to Ianna that even in prison the rule of the hierarchical world follows. Some kings and aristocrats were even in prison, and that gave them a lot of privileges. Prisoners were served lavish meals and desserts, as well as free exercise and other varied entertainment and access to indulge in hobbies, but people still wore prison uniforms. Prisoners had access to the stores in prison like in the common world, where they could buy expensive items or even the latest ones that came in the market. Ianna was bothered as she kept hearing people's firsts a lot recently. Last night, Rike told her that she was the first and cried without stopping. If that was a normal novel, then it could lead to some kind of romance, but that couldn't happen in the particular novel, and that was because of Rike's restraining circle. Rike needs to remove his shackles to get out of prison. It was a magical tool that kept Rike trapped in that cell. Rike would not be able to leave until he was freed from the magic circle, but there was only one person who could set him free, and that was Francia. She was happy for Rike that he would be able to leave in 4 years because of Francia, but now she was worried about herself. Ianna had no idea about when she would get to go out and did not even know what crime had she committed. An elderly man approached her asking if she was thinking about escaping, to which she replied that don't say in such a manner, she felt like a criminal. The man who approached was called Baron Paladis, who was accused of fraud. He told her that since she was in prison, she was already a criminal. Baron asked Ianna if he could join her. Ianna agreed as long as Baron had fun stories to tell her. Baron Whitley told her that if she was looking for something fun, she could just look at herself. He added that if he were her, he would spend the entire day enjoying her radiant beauty in the reflection of the mirror, but Ianna changed the subject and asked if he had anything else interesting, to which she received a counter-question about what she would like to hear. Ianna considered her appearance to be completely ordinary. Moreover, she wanted to live comfortably after she got out of prison, and that she should at least try to keep up with how the story was progressing. When Baron told he could talk about the Domulet facility, it piqued her interest. She asked him to tell about the Domulet family, to which the Baron told her that this was one of the 3 high-ranking families of the Empire. Ianna knew it was also the most villainous in the story. It was the Black Rose of the Empire, but not long ago they caused a commotion recently. Baron told her that Domulet had recently purchased chests of jewelry at an underground auction, and perhaps among them was His Majesty's lost tiara. Ianna remembered this item because it is what the female lead character finds in the villain's house. As soon as rumors about their act reached the Emperor, the Domulet family was immediately searched but could not find anything. Despite plenty of reasons to doubt the family, the very talented Chase Louv Domulet was surely something else, a man of great ability. The rumor didn't end there. Baron reported that, in addition to his son, the Duke also had a daughter who was called the real treasure of the Domulet family. Ianna knew about the villain's younger sister, and that she died from some chronic disease long before the start of the story. Ianna was now sure that events were taking their course as same as the novel was. After which Baron asked her how her recent adventure went. Ianna looked out the window into which the sun's rays were falling and said that everything went well. She thought of Rike and where he was kept. There was not even a single window in his prison. Ianna asked Baron if he knew a way to meet the commander of the prison guards. Rike was sitting in oppressive silence, leaning against the wall, when suddenly his loneliness was interrupted by a stranger looking at him. Rike realized that she was exactly the one who had come to him last night. A smiling girl stood with a lantern in her hands, and Ianna asked Rike what he thought about the walk. In response to her words, Ianna heard only a bark from Rike. No matter how many bribes Ianna gave to the guards, she could not come to the underground prison after every day, so she managed to go down to him only after 3 days. Ianna hoped that she would find him in a normal state, so she was a little taken aback when she saw him in dog form. When she asked if he could only growl, the guy shook his head negatively, which greatly surprised her because he understood what she was talking about. Then she asked if he could only understand her words but not speak back. The guy nodded affirmatively in response, deciding not to torment him any longer. Ianna handed him a loaf of bread that she had stole from the kitchen. Handing him the food, she slowly uttered the word "please" syllable by syllable, but in response he only whined. The girl thought that if Rike could understand what she spoke, then Rike would be able to answer her. But in response she heard only a bark. Having swallowed the whole bun, the Riker choked, and Ianna looked displeased at everything that was happening. She nevertheless handed him a bottle of water, trying to help him swallow the unfortunate bread. After drinking the water, Ianna wiped the remaining water from his mouth, and with a trembling voice Rike told her not to touch him. Ianna noticed that until this moment the guy was happily eating from her tender hands. Looking up at him, Ianna noticed that his eyes were filled with tears and his face turned red. Rike shouted that if Ianna did not take responsibility, she should not dare to touch him, and Ianna thought that Rike already had another person who would take responsibility for him. According to the original novel, Rike was saved by the beautiful, gentle, and talented Francia, who would remove his shackles, and Francia was the reason why Ianna did not feel bad about coming underground to meet him. Sitting down next to him, Ianna noticed that prisoners in the central ward of the prison get to enjoy delicious food, tea breaks, and walks, but for Rike, all this was forbidden. These difficulties were specifically introduced for Rike as he was the main character in the work, but the girl understood that he did not want to live like that at all. The girl asked him if it was too dark for him because the cell had no sunlight and smelled of damp moss, and prisoners were only taken out for a walk once a day. It seemed to her that since this was natural for other prisoners, then the same should be true for the main character, so she invited him to take a walk. In response, he asked her what the mysterious word walk meant, to which he heard that it meant going outside. Rike told her that he was forbidden to go outside, but after that, he heard the question of whether he would go if possible. Ianna took his silence as a sign of consent, but she understood that permission to go for a walk could only be obtained from the commander of the guards. Therefore, after some time, she was already standing at the door of the head of the prison. Ianna was reluctant, as she knew doing all this could also expose how she secretly went to Rike. Ianna hoped everything would work out and requested the guard outside the commander's chamber to let her in. Seeing Lady Ianna, the guard immediately let her in. Ianna could not believe it because it was easier than she thought. Ianna entered the room with a sense of urgency, but to her surprise, she found that it was empty. As she looked around, she noticed that the commander had left and wondered where he could have gone. Ianna sat down on the sofa and pondered over the situation. It occurred to her that the commander might have received an urgent message and had to leave immediately to attend to an important matter. As she sat there, her mind wandered to the prison's hierarchical system, which was made up of different ranks. At the lowest rank were the knights and a few mid-ranking knights, who acted as the prison guards. Their superiors are the commanders of the guards. Above the commanders are the managing officers. At the very top of the hierarchy was the Cambricum's warden, who was responsible for making all the important decisions that affected the prison and its occupants. Ianna couldn't help but wonder what kind of message the commander had received that required him to leave without any notice. The warden was also a key character in the novel, and the right hand of the main villain, Chaser. Together they created terrible evil. The reason for such a partnership was the boss's unrequited love for Chaser's nameless younger sister. The warden was pretty popular for his pure love, despite being a villain. Ianna's thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a male voice asking Ianna who she was, to which the girl replied that she requested a meeting. The man came in and immediately recognized her and said, "Ah, it's you, Lady Ianna, and what are you doing here?" She came to meet the warden but never expected to see this man in his office. His name was Renag Tuz Valtais, and he was a minor character in the book, who also happened to be the warden of Cambricum, one of the marquises of the Empire. Though she can't act like she recognized him, she can't let him know that she was taken aback. To his question about why she was looking for him, Ianna replied that she had come to him with a request for a prisoner. Ianna asked if all prisoners were treated the same, to which the Marquis replied that according to the documents the same. Looking at him again, Ianna tried to understand what he was hiding behind these words. Ianna said that according to the rules, if a prisoner has not committed a criminal offense like murder, arson, or treason, then he is entitled to a walk and various entertainment activities. But after talking with other prisoners, she learned that there was a young man in prison who is kept completely alone. She added that she had heard that he was prohibited from going out for walks, but he was imprisoned, without having committed any crimes. The warden looked at her sternly and asked if she felt sorry for this prisoner. His gaze made Ianna feel uneasy. Ianna was confused as to why he was staring at her like that. Putting on a sweet face, Ianna softly said that she had a younger brother, so she could not pass by ignoring Rike. Ianna didn't know whether she had brothers, but aristocrats' family homes usually have lots of family members, so he also didn't know all of them either. Rike was not also considered a threat here yet. Relations between Renag and Rikedoran only sour only after Chaser appeared, and asked to allow Rike to go on walks. Having thought everything over and realizing that most likely her requests would be refused, she received an affirmative answer. At first, it seemed to her that the warden refused, but he repeated that, and Ianna was not prepared for it. Renag would fulfill her request. He added that he had already promised her father and older brother that he would fulfill any of her requests. Renag knew that Rike was imprisoned as a real criminal, and therefore Ianna did not understand why Renag so easily agreed to fulfill her request. Ianna assumed that her father and brother were surely powerful enough to bribe the warden. Renag said that the young man she was talking about, Rike, was a magical prisoner, so he would be accompanied by mid-ranking knights. After that, he also mentions he made a promise to her brother and he intends to keep it. As Renag walked with Ianna to the door, he took Ianna's hand, brought it to his lips, and kissed it tenderly, telling her that even if her family did not ask him to do so, he would still fulfill any request for nothing in return, and told her to visit again. Ianna thought it was sugar-coated, and the real meaning behind Renag's words was that if Ianna came again, he would kill her. Thinking that, Ianna freaked out and ran away timbling. The next day, looking out the window with the prison bars, Ianna thought that her plan to secure Rikedoran's walks was somewhat in vain because of the heavy rain. She also felt displeased because her plans to just throw the idea of letting Rike out for walks as a kind passerby were ruined by Riang, and she also was not expecting him to know her already. Still, she was happy with the results. The guard guarding Rike was not very happy to see the girl come, and he warned her that it was a little dangerous in the cell that day because the prisoner was screaming. Entering the cell, Ianna thanked him for his concern, but tried to understand what kind of animal screams he was talking about. Entering the cell, Ianna took a towel with her and saw that the entire floor was indeed covered in puddles of water on this day, and also was so damp. Rike barked especially loudly. Ianna knew something was not right. The barks were louder and more aggressive than usual, and was almost like Rike was very scared. Him and treated him as a failure. As a result of the abuse, Rikedoran developed a phobia of water that continues to affect him to this day. He was abandoned by his family and suffered from isolation and despair throughout his childhood. It was later proved in the novel that the reason Rikedoran was unable to control the power was because the power was too strong for him to control at that age. He would completely grasp the way to handle his abilities once Rike meets his partner, who would be the light in Rikedoran's dark life. That was all according to the novel. Back at the prison, Rikedoran trembled in fear while Ianna took a blanket and draped him with it as a gesture of comfort, with a bell held in hand, replacing the sound of raindrops with the sound of the bell. As a distraction, Ianna gave Rikedoran toffees and saw a smile on his face, a small happiness despite the gloomy atmosphere. Ianna felt satisfied for having bought those toffees since it was a great help to her. She covered him with the blanket and started to dry Rikedoran's hair, worried he might catch a cold. Suddenly, a hand appeared to attack Ianna's face. She stumbled and fell. It was Rikedoran's hand. He fell on top of her while he held her hand. Their face was so close to each other at that point. Ianna began to notice the rose around Rikedoran's chest and remembered the fact that the novel indicated that he must find his partner before all of the rose petals fell. Rike started to sniff at her and continued to get closer to her while she hesitatingly tried to push Rikedoran away. He snapped out and fell behind. Rike covered his mouth in confusion and wondered what had happened. Ianna explained to him that it was he who jumped at her to avoid any misunderstandings, and his reaction to this was cute. Rikedoran blushed. Ianna couldn't help but wonder how this cute guy was the male lead of an R-rated novel. She stood and made sure everything was okay when decided to leave the cell. Rike stopped Ianna to inquire about her name, and she replied that her name was Ianna, then left the prison room. The rain continued for a few days, but Ianna didn't pay any visit to Rikedoran. As a punishment for herself, for not maintaining a safe distance with Rikedoran that night. Another reason was the letters that she constantly received from her brother stopped coming, and it weighed on her mind constantly. Ianna saw the letters as the only connection she had in this world at her side. The day Ianna regressed, she was shocked and lonely, but she had this letter next to her which reminded her to write whatever she needed. Since then, she would receive empty papers to fill her wishes. Those letters were sent by her elder brother. He had promised her that whatever she wrote in them would be received by her within a month. However, for a while, she hadn't received any letters from her brother, which caused her to worry, since she would receive letters every 2 to 5 days. But it has been 12 days and there are no letters from her brother. Ridiculous thoughts started to spawn around Ianna's head. She began to worry either about him having encountered any danger or about how he would abandon her if he had grown tired of her. As she was lost in thought, Mr. Barron approached her and inquired her about what she was thinking about. She assured him that everything was okay and asked him whether he had come to share a fun story, basically to share gossip with her. He mentioned that Countess Andrea had fainted, which reminded her of how the Countess's scream woke her up in the middle of the night 4 days prior. He insisted that the reason for the Countess' mishap and distress was not a nightmare, as they say, but the downfall of House Andrea, strategized by the heir to House of Domulet, Chaser Louv Domulet. She questioned Chaser's involvement with the House Andrea. The man continued that it was because House Andrea was a supporter of House Hernim and they acted practically as the right-hand man of the Archduke. The novel mentions that the two houses, Red Rose Hernim and the Black Rose Domulet, have been at each other's throats for decades. It was only natural since the House Hernim was the family of Rikedoran, the protagonist, while the House Domulet was the family of Chaser, the antagonist. Their hatred continued and entangled into a love triangle with the female lead, which ended in bloodshed. Chaser killed all of Rikedoran's father, friends, and subordinates. Rikedoran ironically loved and longed for the love of his father, Duke Hernim. He began to hate Chaser and started to seek revenge. He continued that Chaser was usually intelligent, but this time he made a petty mistake, which left Duke Hernim to get evidence against Chaser. She was very invested in the story. When the man mentioned that Chaser went into hiding, she deduced that he might be hiding in his secret base to plot a new scheme, since he was the villain. And also, she was wondering if this was the time when Chaser killed Archduke Hernim. As time passed, the leisure time finished as they stood to separate their ways to their cell. He asked her whether she was fine, and she assured him that she was okay but only concerned about the sudden stop of letters from her brother. The man reassured her and told her to not worry. She went back to her prison room and lay in her hard bed. She began to think about how would she feel if the one and only person whom she felt close to in the new world were to disappear. Continued to feel anxious that she might be left alone, and fell asleep. Meanwhile, a handsome man on the couch sat with crossed legs, expressing how much he missed Ianna. Ianna was at the leisure place, taking a small rest since she fell down the whole day. She was approached by Mr. Barron, stating that they had gotten a hold of the evidence on who was responsible for the downfall of the House Andrea. He revealed that Archduke Hernim was in critical condition, but the evidence does not exactly point out Chaser but another person, as he mentioned the possibility that Chaser Domulet, the man believed to be responsible for the attack on the Archduke, may not be the true culprit. Could it be that Chaser had someone else to take the fall on his behalf? He theorized that it must be the plan of the Chaser to make someone else take the blame instead of him. Ianna's mind was filled with information. Ianna was reminded that it was mentioned in the novel that Chaser would take away Duke Hernim's life and concluded that the time had not come yet. He continued to express his relief that Chaser wasn't the culprit. Because the prison was filled with the supporters of House Domulet, they would cause acts of terror and chaos whenever something related to Chaser happened. Ianna thought that they befit the role of supporters of villain very much. He told Ianna that he would like to meet Chaser once in his lifetime. She questioned the man why he would want to meet someone dangerous like that, and continued that she would never want to meet Chaser, nor did she have a chance to meet Chaser. The man stated that they might come across each other, since who knows how fate would play with our destinies. As Ianna returned to her prison, a letter arrived for her from her brother. A short yet simple letter written in nice handwriting asked for her well-being and stated that he hoped she would be doing well. Sincerely. She reached out to her brother for some alcohol and high-end cigarettes, and he supplied them to her as soon as he got the response to her letter. The rain finally came to an end. Ianna was at the commander's office, bewildered. Ianna couldn't help but feel uneasy around the commander, who stared at her with his ember eye. She was completely daunted. She maintained her composure as she inquired Renag the reason to summon her. He handed over a jewelry box to her and said it was a surprise gift from her brother, which left her both surprised and confused. The commander then revealed the fact that her last name was hidden as per the request of her brother, a secret Ianna was completely unaware of, since she had no memories before her regression. Despite all the details, Ianna felt grateful to the commander and expressed her gratitude to him. Renag acknowledged that she passed kindness that surpassed both her brother and father. The commander informed her that the young prisoner, who was confined due to his fear of rain, was now allowed to take strolls on behalf of her request. Grateful for the news, Ianna thanked Renag once more to the commander, who responded to her with a rare smile. Ianna had shivers sent down her spine upon witnessing his smile, where the book indicated that Renag would only become soft in front of the person he loved, since Ianna always considered Renag a fearsome figure. The following day, she chat with her cellmate, Sally, about the weather and Sally's changing skin color. Sally mentioned that she was getting sunburned, and Ianna told her she even looked more beautiful after getting sunburned. At that time, Rike was also brought outside by those guards. Upon seeing the guards, Sally inquired about the prison guards. Ianna couldn't help but notice Rikedoran struggled to walk under the bully guards who suffocated Rikedoran and constantly treated him badly. His discomfort was evident, and Rikedoran glanced at Ianna and turned his head away, avoiding Ianna. Strong waves of anger flooded into her as she thought about the guards and their harsh treatment of Rikedoran. Sally then came back and said she just asked the guards, and they said the guy was here for a magic-related crime. When Ianna looked at him again, she did not find him. She became upset. Sally asked Ianna why she looked so upset. She replied because she did all that to get him his walk, but he ran away from her. Well, it does not matter, she will just ask Rike about it later. The unfair actions of the guards made her seethe with frustration. Ianna visited Rikedoran at night after a long time, found him sulky, and blushed upon her arrival and asked him why he ran away from her. He kept blushing. She got angry and said stop blushing because she hadn't even done anything yet. He replied that implies she might do something, and blushed again, and continued what she wanted to do with him seductively. Upon observing closely, she found out he didn't seem to be hurt anyway, and she felt relieved and asked if he didn't want to tell it's fine. Then he stopped her, saying why haven't she come to his cell to see him? Upon Ianna's visitation, Rikedoran sheds tears down his face as a symbol of his longing for her due to the distance between them. Since the guards stood as a wall, demanded bribes, and acted as a constant obstacle for them to meet, Ianna cannot meet Rikedoran if she has no cigarettes and alcohol to bribe them. Ianna clutched Rikedoran's hand tightly and felt his sadness and loneliness. She knew she couldn't bear to see Rikedoran suffer alone. Ianna went closer to him, inquired him about the walks, and if he enjoyed the walk, and told him that she was the one who requested the commander to allow him to take walks. Ianna wiped away Rikedoran's tears and promised him that they would go on the next walk together. He blushed as his face got closer to Ianna and inquired her how he should address her. She teased Rikedoran, suggesting that he should call her master, which cutely shocked him. Finally, Ianna told Rikedoran to call her using her name and demanded that he should not avoid her the next time they met. She patted Rikedoran's head, and he replied with a bark, cased her to raise an eyebrow, and reminded him that he only barks whenever he wants. It was time for their walk. She greeted the guards as she joined them. One of the guards mentioned that Ianna has a kind heart and that she took care of a violent criminal. She ignored the guard and went near Rikedoran. She inquired Rikedoran about his restraints and if they were uncomfortable, to which he replied that he was okay, but hesitantly. Rikedoran found himself in a situation where every word he uttered would be used against him, where everyone thought of him as a dangerous criminal who committed magic-related crimes, and the commander of the guards was the only person who knew his real identity. This issue weighed on Ianna's mind heavily as she worried about the dangerous situations of his life behind bars. She questioned Rikedoran about the restraints and the rope on his wrists. Rikedoran replied to her that he was fine. The guard who stood next to Rikedoran, instead of explaining to Ianna, the guard decided to demonstrate it to her. The guard reached for the rope that hung between Rikedoran's wrists and grabbed him roughly, causing Rikedoran to stumble and fall to the ground. Rikedoran struggled to get back on his feet. The guard continued to explain that the restraints are used to prevent them going on a rampage and stop seizures of mana. Also, the rope could act as a restraint. By pulling the rope and chanting the incarnation, the magic spell would be activated, which would allow the guards to keep Rikedoran's powers under control. Rikedoran was on the ground, and the guard continued to explain to her. Despite the pain Rikedoran endured, Ianna managed to muster a smile and thanked the guard for his explanation. But her smile tingled with a hint of threat, and she glared at the guard, clearly annoyed. As Ianna turned to the other side to take a look at Rikedoran's condition, She was startled to witness him radiating unstable energy. It was a concerning sight, and she realized that the situation was not as good as it seemed. Suddenly, Rikedoran charged into the guards and attacked them. The chaotic scene unfolded as Rikedoran continued on a rampage, losing all his rationality. The guards began to surround Rikedoran and instructed Ianna to evacuate the place for her safety. Captain Anton tried to calm down the guards and instructed them to catch Rikedoran, who was unable to be controlled. In a desperate attempt to control Rikedoran, the guards held the rope and cast the spell as an attempt to subdue Rikedoran. However, the spells had no effects on Rikedoran. The guards repeatedly tried to chant the spell, but it didn't work at all. The guards were shocked at the situation, where they could only watch Rikedoran go on a rampage while he attacked the guards with unmatched strength. Ianna could only watch Rikedoran in terror at the incredible powers he released. The fell near her leg. She took the rope and decided to use the magic restraint on him. To the amazement of the guards, the magic spell finally worked when Ianna touched the rope. The commander asked Ianna to make a command that shuddered Ianna and confused because she didn't know what to say. The captain asked her to say anything. Ianna then finds out Rike was looking her way when he was about to attack. Ianna ordered him to sit, which made him forcefully sit down. Rikedoran obeyed her command and growled as he sat down, which reminded Ianna of a puppy. The captain kept instructing Rikedoran to keep repeating the chants again and again without lowering her guard. As Rikedoran struggled to stand up, she continued to tug the rope and commanded him to lie down. Ianna continued to give some silly commands to sit, stand up, and roll back and forth. Guards were shocked by the fact that Rikedoran obeyed all Ianna's silly requests and were amazed by his puppy-like behavior. She ordered Rikedoran to sit. He began to scratch his head using his leg like a typical dog. Ianna told him not to scratch his head using his leg, and he stopped it, but began to walk like a dog using all 4 limbs, which made her wonder how he was the male lead of the novel. She was speechless by the fact she had the potential to be a dog trainer, since listened to her so well that not even the guards could control him. When the captain asked her whether she was a mage, she sarcastically replied that if she was a mage, she wouldn't be in the prison, which left the captain speechless for her response. Ianna worried about the other inmates. In case if they were to be present at the place where the incident took place, it would be a disaster, but was relieved by the fact that they had cleared the entire area to take Rikedoran out for his walk. Rikedoran gently grabbed Ianna's sleeve and barked. She asked for Rikedoran's hand, and he did not respond. She then asked for his paw, and Rikedoran gave his hand to her. Ianna pondered why he was behaving like a dog, and his condition seemed to worsen day by day. The novel did not method any information about this matter of male Lee acting like a dog. Ianna was reminded to meet the warden upon his arrival at the prison, and they requested Ianna to return to her prison room. She questioned the captain about the plans for Rikedoran and how would they deal with him. The guard's confusion about the rope malfunction was still a question, and he began to explain that it was a rare occurrence for such a powerful restraint to fail, especially since it was used to restrain monsters. Ianna felt dizzy and her breaths became heavy. She couldn't help but wonder why she was experiencing such symptoms. The guard, who was concerned about Ianna's well-being, grew closer as he inquired her about his health. She reassured the captain that she was fine. Rikedoran felt possessive over Ianna, draped his hands around her waist and shoulders, embraced her from behind, and growled at the guard. Despite his intimidating presence, Ianna commanded Rikedoran to sit, and to everyone's surprise, he obeyed her without hesitation. The guard felt relieved to have Ianna's assistance and requested her to help him with taking Rikedoran back to his prison, to which she agreed. At night, she stealthily sneaked into Rikedoran's cell and bribed the guard to gain entry. She entered the room and settled next to Rikedoran, started to apologize to him, and stated that her involvement and the request for him to take a walk caused all these inconveniences. Her words were filled with regrets and sorrow as she questioned the enjoyment he could have possibly had while having restraints. Despite all the chaos, Ianna wanted Rikedoran to truly enjoy the walk instead of getting locked up in prison the whole day. Ianna gently touches Rikedoran's head and pats him. Rikedoran grasped her hand and rubbed his face against her palm, reassuring her that no apology was necessary since he enjoyed being outdoors and the walk. She gazed at him. Rikedoran turned his head away, attempted to avoid her gaze, and requested her to stop staring at him. Ianna clarified that she was amazed he regained his senses. She reassured him that she wanted him to feel comfortable around her. Also, Ianna pointed out the fact that she indeed helped him regain his senses. She inquired whether he remembered his actions when he lost his composition, to which he responded that he would remember the majority of the information, while he avoided her eye contact. Ianna felt sorry for Rikedoran since he must have been embarrassed, remembering his behavior. She asked whether he wanted to go on walks in the future, and he nodded in reply. She draped him with the blanket that she brought over and expressed her desire to greet each other with a smile the next time they met. Rikedoran blushed. Ianna questioned him if it was okay for her to touch him or whether she should refrain from it. Rikedoran gently held her finger, replied that it was okay, and requested a walk together. She was captivated by his smooth yet innocent flirting skills and was taken aback when Rikedoran asked her out and replied she will think about that. At the commander's study, Renag and his subordinate stood opposite each other, the tense atmosphere as Renag grilled his subordinate about the prisoner and the injury caused by Rikedoran, and about the prisoner's involvement in Ianna's injury. The subordinate hesitated, not sure how to respond, and replied that according to the report, there was no evidence linking the prisoner to any harm caused to Ianna. The commander, who was not satisfied with the subordinate's report, slammed his fist on the table and demanded a full and detailed explanation. The tension in the room was suffocating as the subordinate continued to give a detailed explanation to appease Renag's growing impatience. Back at the moment when Renag demanded answers from his subordinate, he was informed about the arrival of Lord Chaser. As soon as Renag heard the arrival of Lord Chaser, frustration that filled him burst, causing him to break his fountain pen in a fit of rage. Renag knew that something serious had happened, something that required Renag's immediate attention. Renag instructed his subordinates to cancel all of his plans and gave orders to provide medicine for Lady Ianna. Then, just like that, Renag was gone. Rikedoran and Ianna were on the ground, playing happily together, and the worries of the past few days faded away. She considered the request from the captain of the guards to watch over and accompany Rikedoran on walks until they found a solution for the restraints. Ianna was relieved that they didn't lock Rikedoran up in his cell after that incident. She thought the guards deserved to suffer to find a solution for the magical restraints since they always mistreated Rikedoran. Despite her thoughts, Ianna agreed to the request to watch over Rikedoran and continued to wonder when Renag would return. As the captain announced the arrival of Renag, Ianna was prepared to meet him later that evening while she sat on a bench. She offered Rikedoran a seat next to her. He couldn't believe his luck when she asked him to sit with her. Ianna held his hand to sit with her since the ground was cold. As Rikedoran leaned in, he stumbled and fell on her lap. Rikedoran's face turned red with embarrassment. Ianna sarcastically told him that she didn't mean for him to sit on her lap but on the chair, commenting to tease his clumsiness. He apologized for his mistake and explained that his leg had gone numb from the cold, which caused him to lose balance. In an attempt to make light of the situation, Rikedoran playfully pulled Ianna into his lap, his cheeks still flushed. Her laughter filled the air as she continued to tease him about his unexpected flirting skills, which were good. Riang, who observed the entire scene from a distance, felt a bitter emotion as he clenched his fist, turned, and headed back to his office, unable to shake the feeling of resentment towards Rikedoran. The following day, Ianna met with the commander and had tea while he praised her for managing an underground prisoner like a trained dog. Renag asked Ianna if she had discussed this prior with her brother, to which she responded that her brother did not know her actions. Her brother only ever saw her request for alcohol and cigarettes, which would be no surprise even if he believed she was an alcoholic. Ianna wondered about her brother and her father, whom she could only meet after she left the prison. Renag placed his cup of tea on the table and concluded that her actions involving Rikedoran had nothing to do with her brother. Renag continued to mention that he would allow Rikedoran to have more walks in the future. He stated that he found the fact that Ianna could handle Rikedoran effortlessly amusing. Ianna was surprised by his amusement and the fact that he constantly mentioned her brother. She tried to subtly extract information from him about her family. She acknowledged Renag that it was understandable that he was surprised by the fact she helped Rikedoran, given the strained relationship between the two families. Renag agreed with her sentiment. Ianna was reminded of the fact that the empire had aristocrats divided into two factions, with one faction supporting House Hernim, to which Rikedoran belonged, and the other faction backing the rival family, House Domulet, to which Chaser belonged. Despite Renag appearing to be neutral, she deduced that he was actually on the House Domulet's side. She concluded that Ianna's family must side with Chaser, the villain, based on Renag's reaction. Renag continued to ask Ianna whether she enjoyed her time with the prisoner and assured her that he would always make time for her if she ever needed to talk to him. With a curious tilt of her head, Ianna pondered why Renag made such a request while she returned to her prison room. Riang couldn't help but blush at the idea of her and him staying at his study alone. Riang, the henchman of the novel's villain, fell in love with Ianna. As Ianna walked towards her cell, she couldn't shake off Renag's kindness towards her and thought his concern about her safety was probably because they were both allied with the villains. The prison was already under the control of Chaser, which was bad news for Rikedoran. She thought of collecting some secret funds to save for when villains inevitably lose. It was raining that day, so the walk was not possible. Then Ianna decided to pay a visit to Rikedoran out of concern that he might tremble in fear. She arrived at the underground prison and sensed a change in the atmosphere, which was filled with an unsettling odor. She was suspicious that something was wrong. When Ianna attempted to enter the prison, the guard tried to stop her. But Ianna insisted and entered the prison after she bribed the guard with a pack of cigarettes. As she proceeded into the prison, she was informed that a visitor had come and gone. Despite her doubts, she entered the prison as the foul stench increased. Ianna witnessed Rikedoran lying on the floor covered in blood. Ianna rushed to his side, kneeled beside Rikedoran, and shook him to wake him up. Ianna recalled that Rikedoran's father was abusive. Ianna was convinced that it was Rikedoran's father who had visited the cell and attacked Rikedoran. Suddenly, Rikedoran used magic and pulled Ianna into a hug. She hugged him back and patted him gently. Ianna was worried about Rikedoran's situation, knowing very well that the guards wouldn't tend to his wounds. She released herself from his hug and hurried back to her cell while contemplating her lack of medicine and thinking of requesting it from her brother. She wrote a letter to her brother and requested medicine, and to her surprise, she received it a few days later. The guard let her take the medicines into Rikedoran's cell. The guard inquired of Ianna the reason why she was helping Rikedoran this much, as his injuries were a common occurrence. She entered the prison and noticed his injuries were doubled. Rikedoran, with injured eyes, inquired who had entered. Ianna approached him and informed Rikedoran that it was her and that she was going to apply medicine. She cleaned his face and hands first and applied medicine. Rikedoran appeared adorable with his hair slicked back. When she saw his face, she laughed out loud and commented that he looked prettier than her, but he disagreed with her. Ianna teasingly asked Rikedoran whether she was pretty, which made him blush. She told him that he didn't need to answer her. She checked him thoroughly to see if all his wounds were covered. Ianna had all kinds of medicine with her, medicine for coughs and burns. Since she didn't specify what kind of medicine she needed, her brother sent all kinds of medicines. Ianna was touched by her brother's thoughtful action. Finally, Ianna had to apply medicine to Rikedoran's shoulders and neck. She also applied medicine to his chest, where he was injured. Ianna wondered whether it was appropriate for her to touch Rikedoran as he took heavy breaths. Thank you for watching our video. If you like our romance manhwa recaps, please consider subscribing to the channel. You can also watch a similar romance manhwa story by clicking on this video right here.